We'd like to welcome everybody out tonight to our rural stress and mental health training, and we really appreciate you all being here tonight. We know that your time is very valuable, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we've got about 12 participants online, and hopefully we can get some more as we continue to move forward. I think I know most of everybody that's on here, but just in case there's one or two that I don't, my name is Josh Dallin, and I'm the extension faculty for agriculture as far as livestock range and 4-H projects here in Box Elder County. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this rural stress and mental health team. And what I'd like to do at this point really quickly is I'll call upon our team members, but let them introduce themselves and where they're located and what their background is with Extension and why they're a part of our team. We are blessed with the very best team members to be a part of this, and very grateful to have them. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with what I can see on my screen from right to left. So we'll start with Tasha Killian, and we'll have Tasha introduce herself to the group, and we'll move on to our next group member.
Hey everybody, we are so glad to have you here tonight. I am Tasha Killian. I'm a faculty member down in Juab County, so I work in Nephi. And my role with Extension is in a lot of different things. I work in family and consumer sciences, health and wellness, and 4-H. But something I'm very passionate about is mental health, and more specifically filling the need of teaching mental health to our farming and ranching communities and to some of those rural communities where it's a little bit harder to get out and to get that mental health. And so I am here tonight to answer any questions and to help with instruction.
Thank you, Tasha. And Tasha is going to serve as our expert tonight. So if there's any questions on the content that's being presented or things that come up that you want to maybe elaborate about, please either unmute your microphone and shout out your question, or you can utilize our chat box down here. Go ahead and type whatever you'd like to into the chat, and Tasha is going to be monitoring that and helping to answer or field some of those questions. So we really appreciate Tasha being here with us tonight. Next, we're going to ask Paige Ray to introduce herself.
All right, I am Paige Ray. I am the Home and Community Faculty Member down in San Juan County. And we're a very rural area. We have some farming, some not farming, but we're just very rural, and we don't have a lot of resources for mental health. And so I really jumped on this topic and really enjoy teaching it far and wide and using it to help my county. So I'm excited to be here and to talk with you guys about this topic.
Thank you so much, Paige. And Paige is going to be one of our main presenters tonight. And so we're very, very grateful that she's with us and willing to present this important information. Next on my screen is Callie Ward. We'll let Callie introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So I am Callie Ward, and I've actually had the honor and privilege of working in beautiful Box Elder County. It's probably my second best county that I've had the privilege of working in. But I am currently in Garfield County, so South Central Utah, and I am also a home and community faculty member. But my role here tonight and on this team is I do have an agriculture background, and my family is currently involved in agriculture in one sense or the other. And so I serve more as an advocate for our amazing ag producers across the state. And Garfield County is extremely rural, like Grouse Creek is, and just stand up for our rural communities. So I'm happy to be a part of this team and happy to be speaking with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much, Callie, and we're happy to have you. And tonight, Callie's we're going to ask her to take some time in just a minute to elaborate a little bit on what she's going to be doing, but she's going to be helping us with some evaluation and some understanding of what that means for our program. So thank you so much, Callie. Next, last but certainly not least, we'd like Jake Hadfield to please introduce himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jake Hadfield. I am the same position as Josh, just over in the next neck of the woods over in Cache County. And so I'm just happy to be here. I'm involved in a lot of crops and livestock issues and different things like that. The mental health stuff is new to me, but I've learned a lot from this team and been able to kind of go and experience a lot of different stories and different things through this team. And so I'm excited to be here and excited to talk to you guys today. So.
Thank you, Jake. And Jake's going to be also co-presenting with Paige tonight on the resources and the information available. And, you know, before we start, I want to make mention that we were fortunate enough to maybe about a year and some odd ago have our own mental health first aid training that was done by Paige and Tasha. And we did that out in Snowville, and we ended up having a bunch of our industry members that came. There was a bunch of the EMTs from Snowville that was there. Western Ag Credit sent a lot of their employees. Bear Co-op sent a lot of their employees. And then Jake and I had the privilege of attending out there. I know Callie has probably attended somewhere else, but we were all able to be out there together and learn. And I wouldn't have imagined the things that we were able to learn, how much of an impact it would have in my life personally, in my ability to help family members, to help friends, to help myself in different aspects. And so I really hope that those that are participating tonight can glean from this information that's going to be taught, and that it'll be a benefit to you. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over before we start to Callie, who's going to talk just a little bit about what she's going to be doing tonight and its importance.
Thank you, Josh. So at the end of the presentation, we are going to ask you all to complete the survey. So in a lot of our extension programming, we want to make sure that we're providing beneficial information to our target audiences. And so because we're almost pioneering this concept of mental health and outreach to rural stress in Utah, we are going to use you almost as our guinea pigs as we get feedback and information from you. And so as you're listening tonight, find a few takeaways and a few nuggets of knowledge, but also consider filling out this evaluation. It's maybe 20 questions top, but a lot of them are yes, no, and it's just almost invaluable information that we can take and improve this presentation and help communities across the state. So I will drop the survey link into the chat right now, and I will follow up at the end just as a quick reminder, just to take a couple minutes, it's maximum 5 minutes, to fill out this online survey so that we can get some great information back from you so that we can improve our program. So thank you, and I'll turn the time over to the other presenters.
All right, Jake, if you want to pull up the PowerPoint, we'll get started.
Let me know. I know that's probably presenter view. Is that regular view?
It looks good, Jake.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you all here tonight. One of the things we wanted to bring up before we get going into our presentation is we know this is over Zoom and it's not the most fun thing to do, but in that same voice, we've actually been able to have a lot of discussion happen in these Zoom meetings. We've done this presentation, I think, about 5 times now. And we've been able to see quite a bit of really good participation, whether it's in the chat or you just jumping in. So we just want to say, feel free to jump in if there's something that really strikes you, as well as feel free to just put it in the chat as well. We've seen both really work well, and we just like you guys to be involved and engaged with us as we go through this presentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Paige with that, and we'll go from there. So.
Thank you, Jake. And I just want to echo what he said. We want this to be a discussion. We can sit and talk to you all night long, but it's not going to really mean anything. until we start having a discussion about it. Yes, we can lecture, but discussions are the things that really drive it home. So we hope that you guys will feel comfortable enough to put it in the chat, to unmute your microphone and talk to us, and we'll just have a really good discussion tonight. So the title of our presentation is "The Biggest Asset is You." And the reason we were talking about this is because we think a lot of times in farm and ranch operations, people think of the assets they have as their land or their equipment or anything like that. And if those aren't working, that is a big detriment to you and to your operation. But if those things are working and you're not working, if you're not maintaining and taking care of yourself, then it's going to be just as detrimental as if your machinery wasn't working. So that's why we've titled it this. So why are we teaching this, and why is this an important thing? So here's a quote that we came across. If a farmer had a piece of machinery he was working on in his shop fall and break his leg and pin him under it, he'd call a neighbor to come with his big loader and lift the machine up to free him. He'd call his wife to get an ambulance coming. He'd call family or helpers to take over while he went for medical care. But in the midst of a financial, marital, or emotional crisis, he could be paralyzed from calling for help. So I want you guys to think about, and again, please feel free to answer this question out loud. Why is seeking help for a mental health issue different than seeking help for something physical? Does anybody have any thoughts? You can put your thoughts in the chat, or you can unmute. No thoughts? Okay. Oh, it's stigma. Yep. Thanks, Josh. That's great. There's a stigma around it, so people necessarily don't want other people to know that they're having these types of issues. Does anybody else think of anything? A lot of times we got the answer that a mental health issue is something you can't see, whereas physical you can. So if you see somebody with a physical issue, you're going to tell them to go get help. But if you can't see the mental health issue, you can't tell them to go get help, or you don't know how to help. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, this is gonna be a quick class if nobody wants to speak up. So Jake, if you'll go to the class overview, this is kind of what we're gonna talk about tonight. We're gonna talk about stress, because stress is something that we all experience. We're gonna talk about the signs and symptoms of stress. We're going to talk about like stress versus having a mental health issue. Sometimes people may think that it's just stress when it's in reality something worse. Or sometimes people think they're having an issue when in reality it's just stress. So we kind of want to draw your attention to what the differences are. We're going to talk about anxiety, and we're going to talk about living with mental health struggles. We're going to talk a little bit about depression and suicide. And then at the very end, one of the most important things that we're going to talk about is how you can respond to somebody and give them resources or use resources with people to get them the help that they need. Because a lot of times people tell us they just don't know where to go. They don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, and they don't know how to help. And so I feel like that's one of the most important parts of our presentation, is how you can respond to somebody and where you can go to get them help. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jake, and he's going to talk a little bit more about our why.
So thank you, Paige. One of the things that we really want to kind of stress about this is the why behind this. Now, there's some stats up here, but before we get to these stats, one stat that I've recently just reviewed, they had a statistic stating the total amount of suicide deaths from the workforce, so people from the ages of 16 to 64. And one thing I don't know if you guys realize, but 36.1% of those suicides actually came from agriculture, from the field of agriculture in some form or shape. And so really, this is a problem that we've been seeing in our agricultural areas. Another issue that we're seeing with this, because this is directed at more rural areas, is we kind of have to understand that 20% of our nation's population is actually a part of or live in rural communities. And so, I mean, even though I know there's smaller population, there's a lot of people who live in those smaller areas. Now, some of the problems that we see in these rural areas is that there's a lot of greater isolation. So for Paige, some of the people that live down in her county, in San Juan County, they only make a grocery trip once a month because they live 6 to 7 hours away. So if you can imagine, that's huge. And you guys understand, I mean, you guys are a little ways away as well, but in the same breath, there is that isolation where sometimes you only see your family for so long. And sometimes this can be just isolation, sometimes can compound mental health issues. And so it can create problems due to the fact that people are on their own. And if you think about agricultural life, a lot of times, you know, as farmers, just be due to the job, you have to do it by yourself. And so a lot of times, you know, you're out working by yourself. Another thing that we see in these rural areas is that there's a lot of stress, kind of elevated stress levels. We especially see this because a lot of times, a lot of the jobs are very physically demanding. We know farming is, but another job you can think of from a rural area as well as you could think of mining and different things like that. But those physical demands can also elevate stress levels overall. And so the approach that we're taking with this is because we have these issues, we kind of want to take a community mentality approach, where if we can help one person gain knowledge about mental health or how to handle mental health or just to be more aware, that's one more person who is able to help in the long run. And so some of the barriers that we see to better mental health, and we've talked about this a little bit, is a lot of times we see an issue with access to services. So there might not be services available or services available nearby. That makes it really difficult to be able to approach and try and get mental health help. Another thing that we see is that mental illnesses are not always accepted. People don't always accept those illnesses as illnesses, and that can be a huge problem. But last and not least, we also see stigma. And so for you guys personally, I want you to you can just put some things in the chat. What do you think are some barriers for you getting better mental health? If you had a friend approach you today, what things would make it difficult for you to be able to get them mental health help overall? And I have issues looking up the chat with my dual screen here, but I think I can get it. Is there anything you guys can think of? Not knowing how or where to help. Yeah. And that's perfect. That is the perfect. Yeah. And honestly, that's what we're hoping this training will help with, to be able to help get better resources. And so to talk a little bit more about stigma specifically and how big of an issue stigma can be, let's see if it'll go now. Basically, stigma, what we see is it's a mark of disgrace associated with a particular situation. Or in other words, it's kind of a topic that has a negative connotation with it. When you think about stigmas regarding mental health, you think about what leads to those stigmas. Have there been negative experiences in your community, maybe? Have there been issues? That sometimes, a lot of times, is what it is. You know, there's an incident that happens. For example, one thing that's happened to me recently, in our office, we actually had someone who came in who was struggling with mental health, and they were having some issues as they came into our office. Now, while she was in our office, I kind of took an inventory of myself because I've done this training. I noticed how I felt differently. Like, I noticed my heart rate picked up because I could see that there were some issues going on. And we tried to redirect her to help, but she wasn't willing to look for any help as well. And so sometimes mental health incidents can be like that, where they're kind of more confrontational. However, a lot of times, and probably most of the time, these mental health issues aren't even seen. Rather, they're just, you know, your next door neighbor might be struggling with it, but you have no idea. Yet, if your next door neighbor broke their leg, it would be very apparent. You would see that. And a lot of times we would see, you know, we'd be bringing them meals or different things, but these mental health issues don't always get the same, I guess, they don't see the same treatment overall. Now, the question comes in, how can we overcome the stigma? So first of all, one of the best ways that we can overcome the stigma is knowledge. That's one thing that I've appreciated through this program is I've been able to gain a lot of knowledge about mental health and how to better handle situations where we're involved with mental health. But also receiving resources is key. Because just like you said, just like the comment said, is not knowing where to go or where to send people. But resources, being able to know what resources are available are huge so that you can be able to help others who are struggling. And last but not least, one of the keys to overcoming stigma is sharing stories. So Josh mentioned earlier that we had the training in Box Elder County where Paige and Tasha came and taught us on mental health first aid. And one of the things that I noticed in that is there was pretty good discussion the whole time, but there was one incident where one person there shared a story about a friend of his. And after that story was shared, I felt like the floodgates opened and that people were sharing left and right. And so sharing that story, sharing stories a lot of times can be a good way to kind of talk about different things, different mental health issues, and just to get conversation going. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time back to Paige, and we're going to start talking about stress. Unless someone has a comment or anything, we're going to go ahead and move into that.
All right, so if we were in person, this would be a lot better, but I just want you to visualize if I was standing in front of you and I had my arm all the way stretched out and I had a water bottle, a full water bottle sitting on the palm of my hand, how long do you think I could hold my arm out for? You guys can put an answer in the chat, or if you're brave enough, unmute yourself. And how weak do you think I am? How long do you think I could hold that water bottle up? Anybody? One hour? Thanks, Josh. 3 minutes. It's probably closer to that. Yep. And now I want you to think about, yeah, not very long. Thanks, Kelly. Now I want you to think about yourself. How long do you think you could hold that water bottle up? Just think about that for a minute. You guys are all probably a lot stronger than I am, so you could probably hold it up a lot longer than I could. But that water bottle represents stress. So we all have stress, but we all carry our stress differently. Even though we all have a full water bottle, some people are able to hold their water bottle up better than others. So we all experience stress, and stress is a physical or a chemical or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension. It affects everybody. Not all stress is bad. I experience stress a lot at work, but I actually work better under stress a lot of times. So not all stress is bad. Sometimes it produces great results, but it's when it becomes long-term that it can be unhealthy, and it's manageable most of the time. So I want you guys to think about, how do you manage stress in your life? And think about the things that you do. And if you're willing, if you would put it in the chat, how do you manage stress, or those times when you just kind of feel a little agitated and irritated and overwhelmed? What are some things that you do? Exercise? Good. Sleep? That's a good one. Everybody else must just handle their stress really well and not have any. Take a walk. That's a really, really good one. Okay, if you'll go to the next slide, Jake. Managing stress is something that you really need to figure out what works for you. Because again, when it becomes unmanageable, that's when you probably need to seek help. Or when it's lasting longer, that's when we need to seek help. But if you can manage it by yourself, that's really great. So you can exercise, like somebody said, having relationships, like going and talking to your neighbors or talking to your spouse or talking to somebody you work with. It doesn't have to be like you telling them you're stressed. It doesn't have to be anything like that, but just creating those relationships. Having hobbies is a great thing to do, and getting quality sleep. So we like to call these like reset strategies, or sometimes they'll call them self-help, but I don't like that term. I feel like that's kind of a guru term. So just ways that you can help yourself get out of these stressful things. I really like to go for a walk or check on your animals. I think that's a great one. And sleep for me is also a great one. So I want you to just think about, or pick something that the next time you're stressed, you can use to de-escalate your stress. You can use to kind of get away and release that tension in your body. So we all have stress, but when does someone need to seek professional or other help for that stress? Jake, if you'll go to the next slide. Oh, I really love that answer. Do something for someone else. That's a really great answer when you're stressed, because it gets your mind off of you and you're thinking about other people. I really love that one. So stress are the signals to your body to slow down and take steps to check. And then when stress isn't managed, kind of like I've said, or triggers more than a normal reaction, that's probably when it's time to seek help. So that's when you might know that it's time for you to go and find some help. So if you'll go to the next slide, Jake. So I'm sure that we've all seen these in other people, or, you know, if you've experienced something, I'm sure that we've seen some of these symptoms of mental health issues. They can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be behavioral, and they can affect your relationships. So what do these signs and symptoms look like in a rural community or in a farming operation? Because I feel like sometimes they might look different. Has anybody ever seen these signs in people around them, or if they've ever been in experiences like this?
Paige, I was just gonna say, one of the things that through this training and other people have talked about in farming communities is one thing they notice is sometimes there's farmers who really, there's no weeds in their field, everything is really prim and proper, yet they'll notice that in tough times, sometimes those things, you'll notice some weeds, things are dirtier than usual, just some little things like that have changed. That's
a great one. And somebody on their iPhone put they notice these at harvest. That's probably a good time to notice those. Stressful time. My brother manages a large operation in Idaho, and this last harvest, he had everything go wrong, and I don't know how he survived, but he did. But he did a lot of those self-care, self-help type things. They're not able to carry the same workload. That's a big one. That's a really big one. I feel like a lot of times when we think of mental health issues, we think of like the physical and the emotional, but sometimes we may not think of more of the behavioral or the relationship type things where people withdraw, where they have conflict a lot more, or they're avoiding others. Like, I just think sometimes when we're not really familiar with it, we just think, oh, people are tired and they cry, or they just get angry easily, but it can be a lot of different things. And so it's important to know these signs and symptoms to be able to monitor and help those around you. Now, this training, I always like to stress, this training does not certify you to go now and start diagnosing people with mental health issues. This is just for an awareness that you can be, so that you can be aware and help people if they need it, or if they come to you, or if you have a good enough relationship, sometimes it's okay for you to talk to them. But I think that's more of a thing that you need to gauge where your relationship is. But again, we give you these just so that you can be aware, not so you can be, you know, go to work tomorrow and think, oh, they didn't eat lunch. Maybe they're having a mental health issue. That's not what this is. This is more of just a awareness. So like Jake talked about, that we can give that one person the tools or the help that they can maybe help one person later on. So if you'll go to the next slide, Jake. And then here's again some stress versus mental health illness. So stress is response to an external cause, and mental health illnesses are a specific reaction to stress that originates internally. And mental health issues are diagnosed by a professional. Again, this class is not going to make you a professional. You taking a mental health first aid class is not going to make you a professional. It's just giving you those skills and those tools to be able to help somebody if that ever happens that you need to. And then I really like this statistic. 27% of adults experience the onset of a mental health illness each year, but less than 25% of adults each year seek treatment for their mental health. And that's kind of a hard-hitting statistic. Only a fourth are seeking help for this. And so again, hopefully by making you guys aware, you know where to go and you know where to direct people to get this help, so that this statistic can change and we can have a bigger percentage of people seeking help. Because again, going back to the whole title of this presentation, the biggest asset of your operation, of your family, of whatever, is you. If you're not functioning correctly, then most everything else is not going to be able to function correctly either. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jake again, and he's going to talk a little bit about anxiety and the signs and symptoms of that.
Perfect. Thanks, Paige. So with anxiety, Okay, so Paige has done a good job describing stress and overall, the different influences of stress. And a lot of times we think stress and anxiety go hand in hand, but they are actually different in their origin. They are different where it originally comes from. However, there are some similarities between the two. Now, every one of us has experienced feelings of stress and anxiety in our life. Like there's times when we really start to feel that, and really when it becomes actual anxiety is, like Paige has mentioned, when it really starts to have a severe impact on our daily life. That's when we really need to make sure that we seek help and be able to try and find that help. So for instance, some of the anxiety disorders that you guys have probably heard a little bit about, but for instance, phobias are anxiety, social anxiety, PTSD, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, and OCD are all forms of anxiety disorders. Now, a high level of anxiety over a long period of time often leads people to feel a lot of depression. And so these symptoms actually can go hand in hand with one another. And there's a lot of people who have both anxiety and depression at the same time. And so, okay, get ready for an activity because we're doing an activity. So you're going to have to put stuff in the chat. But one of the things that we want to point out here is when you think of anxiety, where do you think symptoms occur? And so I've put this guy up here and I kind of want to use him as an example. So let's say you get a knee injury. Where you think your symptoms are going to occur are, around your knee. That's where your pain's going to be focused. There might be some mental effects eventually. You might get back pain due to just the trauma of it all. But the focus right there is in the knee. Now, what I want you guys to do, and you can do this, you can write this in the chat, you can kind of put it wherever, but I want you to take the next minute or so, and I want you to think about where anxiety symptoms occur and where you would put circles, where you'd put different things, and tell me where you think most of those symptoms occur. See, I'm seeing stomach area, tiredness. That's awesome. Stomach and head, shoulders and head. Perfect. Head, yep. Tightness of the chest. Yeah, all good. All perfect. So I put a few on here. I'm not saying that these are all the anxiety symptoms. I just wanted to show how broad anxiety can be. And you guys have illustrated heart racing. That's perfect. And that's actually my first one is heart racing. Because when I start getting really high levels of stress, almost to the anxiety, my heart starts to beat. However, I've also seen people feel stomach problems. My wife is particularly that way. Her nerves get shot and she feels stomach problems. There's people who feel head. You guys have mentioned that, as well as I've heard a lot of people say they get aches and pains. It's interesting because some people mention that after high levels of stress overall, they have like their left shoulder or something. They carry all their tension in their left shoulder, so it hurts. So it's just interesting to see all the different symptoms that can come from stress and technically just come from an overload of anxiety. Now, overall, some of the signs and symptoms we talked about physical already. There's some behavioral things that we see. And some of those things are, we see people start to have avoidance. People who have anxiety disorders with that high load of anxiety really just get to the point where they want to avoid things, being around others. There's a avoiding social situations. Sometimes these come because these people have a phobic behavior. They're scared of things. We also see that some people, in order to cope with it, they kind of have an obsessive or compulsive behavior where they have to do things in a certain way. We also see psychologically that there is, with anxiety, a lot of times it's an unrealistic fear or excessive worry. A worry that, the worry won't do anything, but it's there and it's prominent. We also see mind racing, going blank, decreased concentration and memory, irritability, fatigue, even vivid dreams is another thing that we see with people in anxiety. And so really, there's a lot of different symptoms here that you can see with anxiety. But again, it's important to stress when anxiety becomes a mental illness is when it starts to affect our life, love, and work. And so a lot of you are wondering, when do we say that this is actually a mental illness? And this is really when it hits the pavement, is when their life, their love, and their work is affected. Now, I want you guys to think about this in your minds. Think about how would someone who is affected by paraplegia be treated differently than someone who is affected by PTSD? And I just want you to think about that with, you could think as if a neighbor was doing that, and go ahead and you can just type a little something in the chat if you want. I'll give you just a minute or so just to respond to that question. Perfect. Okay, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. So from the iPhone, PTSD is not all the way visible. That's, yes, right on point. Nobody would say to the paraplegic, buck up and get over it. That also is very true there. And I think that's the important thing. And I really like what people have been saying. With a person who has paraplegia, it's very visible. You can see that. And a lot of times there's a lot of assistance that comes there. There's like, a lot of times neighbors are bringing dinner, neighbors are doing other things, show more sympathy to the outward symptom. Yep. And someone who's struggling with PTSD, although a lot of times it's quiet, we don't know. That's a very personal thing. People might keep that very personal. So it's hard to know that. But also when you do know, it's hard to know, do I bring a meal? What do I do? Because it's just not something that we commonly talk about. But the biggest thing I wanted to point out with these two is that both of these can really have major effects in your life, love, and work. I mean, obviously, paraplegia is going to have an impact in all three of those. However, PTSD is also, a lot of times in life, it can be hard because of the stress or the fear and anxiety that's constantly there. It also can ruin relationships. Just due to the fact that these people might be on edge all the time due to that anxiety, as well as it can affect work. So overall, we can see that these mental things can affect us just as much as regular illnesses as well. And with that, we're actually going to go to an activity that Paige is going to introduce to us here right now. So.
Okay, so a lot of times when we do this activity, people get mad because they're like, how did you weight this? How did you come up with the answers? This activity comes from the mental health first aid curriculum. And I want to stress before we start that I'm not saying anything is better or worse than anything else. These diseases, mental health issues, things can affect people in different ways. So I'm not saying that just because you have severe depression, somebody with severe PTSD or low back pain needs more help than you. I'm not trying to say that. These are just how they would affect your daily life from the outside, how we would look at somebody that these affect their daily life. So I want you to look at all these, and I want you on a piece of paper to write them in order from something that affects your life the most to the disease that affects your life the least. So I hope that makes sense. We're going to give you a few minutes. So take these and write them. And this is just how you think it would affect your everyday life, from the most effect to your everyday life to the least effect of your everyday life. I'll give you about 1 more minute or 2 more minutes to do that. Okay, as you're wrapping up here, I'm going to go through this, and this is, again, what affects a daily life from the most severe to the least severe. And I want you to kind of compare with what you've put, and if there's anything surprising at the end, let us know and we can talk about that. So first of all would be severe dementia, then severe schizophrenia, then severe depression, severe chronic bronchitis or emphysema, severe PTSD, paraplegia, severe vision loss, severe asthma, moderate depression, non-invasive breast cancer, epilepsy, low back pain, uncomplicated diabetes, and then gingivitis. So again, that's from the most effect on your daily life to the least. And again, I'm going to stress this. Everybody experiences stuff differently. These affect people differently. So just because we did this activity, I'm not saying one is worse than anything else or one is easier than anything else. But this is just kind of to show you how mental health illnesses, things that we may not be able to see, can affect somebody's daily life. So was there anything surprising for anybody in this activity? A lot of times when we do this activity, people will put paraplegia at the very end, thinking that that's the most effect on their daily life. But it's interesting, again, to see that things that we may not see can affect people almost just as much as things that we can see. Josh he was surprised that some of the physical things aren't a bigger effect. That's really interesting insight. Most people say that. Anybody else have anything that they thought was interesting? Yeah, some of these things could snowball into others. A lot of times, you know, maybe something physical could bring you down and it could cause a depression. It could cause anxiety symptoms, or if you were physically hurt somehow, maybe that causes PTSD for those situations moving forward. So yes, a lot of times these things could cause things or could make these things worse. Okay, thank you guys for doing that activity. If you'll go to the next slide, Jake. I feel like a lot of times when people don't have a lot of experience with mental health issues, they think of depression, and depression is the big one that always comes to mind. There's various forms of depression. There's seasonal, there's bipolar, there's major depressive disorder, and there's postpartum disorder. And again, somebody can be sad, somebody can be down, somebody can be kind of fatigued, but you know that it's becoming a mental health issue when it lasts for more than 2 weeks and affects their ability to live, work, and love. Because sometimes people get sad and something happens, something caused them to be sad, and they're okay, you know, after a week, after a few days, or they don't let it affect their life, their work, and their love. So again, when these signs and symptoms that we're going to talk about last for more than 2 weeks and affect your life, your work, and your love, that's when you should probably start looking at getting some help. So if you'll go to the next slide, Jake, we're going to talk about depression signs and symptoms. So again, they can be physical, behavioral, or psychological. People can have lack of energy, unexplained aches and pains. They can withdraw, they can be crying a lot, they can lack interest in things. They can have sadness, they can be irritable, and they may have thoughts of death or suicide. So those are some signs and symptoms. We're going to talk a little bit about suicide. This is a sensitive topic for some people. It's uncomfortable for some people. So if this is triggering or it's sensitive for you, feel free to step away for a little bit while we talk about this, because I know that it's hard for some people to talk about that have experienced things related to suicide. So these are some of the risks that they've found with suicide. Having these risks does not mean that somebody's going to complete suicide. It just means that it may make it more likely if they're depressive that it could. So a certain type of age, if they have the means, a certain type of gender usually attempts and completes suicide more. If they've had previous attempts, if they have an organized plan, if they're using alcohol, and if they have lower social support. Again, these don't mean that it's actually going to happen, but this is somebody that's more at risk. So if you'll go to the next slide, Jake. So these are the warning signs of suicide: threats to kill oneself, seeking access to means, researching the methods, talking about death and suicide, if they have reckless behavior, withdrawing, if they're having a dramatic change in mood, if they're giving away their items. One thing that in our last couple of classes we taught was really interesting to people is I feel like a lot of times, again, if you haven't had a lot of experience with suicide, experience with depression and things, you may think that somebody's going to be sad all the time and they're just going to be down. But a lot of times they've found, and not all the time, but sometimes they found that the dramatic change in mood, people become happier because they've decided, they've made the decision that they're going to attempt suicide. And so they have a way out. They have a way out of their pain. They have a way out of everything that's going on. And so they become a lot happier. And people find that one really interesting. In our class, one guy, talked about that. He said, my friend was really down and sad all the time. And then one day he came and he was super happy, super talkative. And then a week later he was gone. And it was a real wake up call to that guy. So because we're kind of in rural areas, we wanted to just give you some rural suicide facts. So people in rural areas have higher rates of completion. Men living in rural areas are 2 times more likely to complete suicide. And most suicides in rural areas continue to be completed by firearms because that's probably the easiest means for people in rural areas to get. So, and so if we encounter somebody having these suicidal thoughts or we're worried about somebody, here are some ways that we can respond to suicide. And I'm going to ask you to practice these. Hopefully you're sitting next to somebody. I'm going to ask you to say these out loud. It's awkward. It still is kind of awkward for me. I have never been in this situation with somebody really. I've practiced, but I've never been in the situation. And I would hope that I could keep my composure in this situation because it's still awkward for me. But I want you to take a few minutes and I want you to talk to the person next to you, or if nobody's next to you, just say this out loud because you need to practice it coming out of your mouth. I want you to say, are you having thoughts of suicide? And then, are you thinking about killing yourself? And if you're talking to somebody, they don't need to respond. They just need to be quiet, but I want you to just practice talking to somebody. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Again, if you're with 2 people, I want each of you to take a turn and just practice saying this to each other because practice makes prepared. Okay, I hope you all had a chance to do that. Again, it's awkward, but the more you practice it actually coming out of your mouth and the more you practice saying it to somebody, the more prepared you're going to be. Josh wanted to share an experience.
Thanks, Paige. I know that this might seem awkward, and it is at first, but what I wanted to share, and I have his permission to do so, is that little did I know when I received this training first from Paige and Tasha, that me practicing these things and learning these things would be essentially what would help to save my brother's life. Not long after I had this training, I started to notice the things that Paige and Jake have taught us about in my brother. And in doing so, one day in having a conversation, I was able to ask these questions and able to respond appropriately to get him the help that he needed. And so I know, again, sometimes we think that these things, I remember even out there, that training thinking, you know, but I wanted to share that because it has had a profound impact on me and my family. And at the time of these trainings, I never would have known any different. I wouldn't have thought that my little brother was dealing with those things. I never would have thought that that was a big issue at all. And quite honestly, I was just there because I was helping to host the clinic. But it turned out that that information became profound for me. And so I hope that everyone will keep in mind these things, because you'll never know when they might come in handy and when you might make a big significant difference in somebody's life. So thanks for letting me share that, Paige. I just wanted to maybe put into real life action what a difference it makes when we are prepared for things like this.
Thank you, Josh. I really appreciate you sharing that. And that brings up a really good point. If you can appear confident in these situations, you can be reassuring to somebody. So again, this may be super awkward. You may never even need to use this. But if you can appear confident, if you've practiced and you're prepared, you can be so reassuring to somebody. So after you've asked these questions, if they answer yes, this is how you would respond. Keep them safe. Oh, sorry, will you go back?
Not yet. Sorry, wrong one.
You're fine. Keep them safe. Stay with them and assist them through. Ask them if they have decided how they will kill themselves. Ask them if they have decided when, and ask them if they have collected the means. And something I always get when we teach these classes is a lot of people think if you put this in somebody's mind, then they're going to do it. But that's not true. You talking about it and you bringing it up makes it more okay and more normal for them to share how they're feeling with you. So don't be scared to bring this up with somebody, because you normalizing it and you talking about it is going to make it 10 times better. So now you can go to the next slide.
Okay, I'll get the timing right eventually by the end. So one thing I actually wanted to say before I go into this slide is that I made a mistake earlier in this mental health presentation. And one of the mistakes that I made is I used the word committed suicide, and that is not the correct term. And I'm sorry, because I told you I'm new to this mental health stuff and I'm still learning as I go. And there's some things I've been trying to change. And a lot of you might think that that's just a word, but I really do believe that words have a lot of power, and they can also show a lot of respect to certain people. But we try and use the terms attempted or completed suicide in order. It just gives a better connotation, kind of helps to take away the stigma, as well as shows respect to those who have lost loved ones to suicide. And so I just really think that those simple word changes are something to think about. I think it allows us to show more respect for suicide, as well as help us to have better awareness about it. And so that's something I just want to apologize, because I made that mistake right up front. And so anyway, I'm a work in progress. So, but now that we've kind of gone through these things, here is where the how to help comes into play. Okay. And so first of all, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be asking. Now with asking, I also think it's important to listen. So we're going to ask how someone is doing, ask how we can help them, ask if you can help them. And also it might require us to ask what they may be going through. We're going to have to get an understanding of the situation and be able to help. Now, before I go on to any more of these steps, one of the things that you should remember is that if at any time you don't feel like you can handle the situation, you can hand the situation off to someone else. You can be able to help find resources that can be able to better help and be able to help these people, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed. After we ask, the next thing that we do is we respond. So we're going to respond to them appropriately. Sometimes this means that we're going to be diving a little bit further into what is happening, what's going on with them. Sometimes it doesn't mean that. Sometimes we're not diving further. It also, we need to call appropriate services and also follow up as necessary. And so one of the things that we need to remember is that oftentimes in our response, we can offer help, but the person who we're trying to help is responsible for taking that help upon them. And sometimes people refuse to take that help. They won't grab that help at all. Last but not least, after we respond to this, we connect. We try and connect these people to the appropriate resources, to the appropriate helps, and connect them to others so that there's a plan of action for how this will happen. And actually, I wanted to see, and I don't know, Josh might not want to do this, but I actually wanted to ask Josh, because he did this process a little bit with the story that he shared. I just wanted to ask him if he'll say anything. It's talk about maybe some of the difficulties or some of the things that he faced as he did that. If he is here. Oh, there he is. Okay.
I am here. You know, I'm happy to share it. And again, as I mentioned, once we were able to get my brother the appropriate help that we needed, and I was able to get help from Paige and Tasha and some resources and things. And once we were able to get to that point, I'm happy to say that he's doing so much better, that they were able to find the professionals. And Tasha or Paige talked about this right in the beginning, that, you know, oftentimes we can help them along the way, but the professionals are the ones to help diagnose and get them to where they need to be. And I'm happy to say that thanks to professional help, my brother's thriving and he's doing wonderful now. But it's been almost a year, and it's been a little bit of a challenge as we went. But in asking how to help him, I guess maybe what I'll say is learning these phrases and these techniques that were being taught tonight made a significant difference in how I was able to have that conversation. And actually, the thing that made it the most difficult was I happened to be with another family member when this started to happen. These conversations started to unfold. And that other family member actually started to try and solve the problems or respond how I probably would have before I received this training. And thankfully, I received this training and was able to not only help my brother, but my family member to understand that that is not how we can handle certain things. And so responding appropriately, like Jake was saying, and asking how they're feeling and what you can do and where they're at. One of the things that actually was really hard for me for the first little while is keeping connected. You see the word connect, and it says talking about the resources and getting them that help. That was okay. We found out that the resources were a little bit more limited than we'd like to see, and our team has worked to try and improve that for everyone. But the thing that I found difficult the first couple of days after was checking in on him. I knew I needed to do it. And I knew that I needed him to know that I loved him and that I cared about him. But I also was worried about smothering him. And I was worried about him diving deeper than what he should have. But being able to ask how he was doing, and I'm going to be honest, you know, I'd send a text and sometimes it would be a 2-hour response time. And I'd get really nervous, especially after initial conversation. But opening that up, it has now gotten to the point where after a year's time, I can ask him how he's doing and he'll tell me, you know, so it was hard. It was awkward. It was different. It was difficult. But by following the things that were being taught here in this program, it made a big difference. And later on, especially after he's went through the process and has been able to get some of the help that he's needed, he's reverted back saying how much of a helpmate it was to him that I knew the right responses and that I was able to do it. And by no means am I a professional, but just thinking about some of these true and simple things that we're learning here, it made a giant difference in the overall outcome.
Thanks, Josh. And I think that's important. Oh, go ahead, Paige.
No, sorry. Tasha wanted to share an experience.
Go Tasha.
Thanks. I just wanted to hop on here and share something it's similar to what Josh's story is, but it's much more broad in the sense that it's with people that I didn't necessarily know. It actually happened just this week. And I think it really brings home that point of it's okay to respond and to just go with your gut instincts. You know, we all have that ability to just kind of feel when something is off, and it's okay to ask a question or to send some help out. And so I work in Nephi. I live up in Springville. And so I was driving home and there's some kids that were sitting on top of the overpass. And I could tell that they're kind of in a crowd with a bunch of, you know, teenagers, and teenagers do, you know, crazy things all the time. And so at first I was like, okay, it's just a bunch of kids sitting on top of the overpass. But I did a double take, and one of them was, I mean, feet dangling off of the overpass, and it just felt like something was off. And so I immediately I called 911. I called dispatch, and dispatch was there to respond. I don't know what happened with the situation. I was on my way home and just continued on my way home, but I just felt like it needed to be said here, kind of jumping in and saying it's okay to just call somebody else to kind of come be that backup for you as well. Because yes, we live in some rural areas, and the police force in these areas, they do so much. They are trained in so many different things. And so the team that was sent out, just talking with the sheriff about it, the team that was sent out, they're actually trained in suicide prevention and how to kind of use those tactics to talk somebody down, and that's their role. And so if you ever get to a situation where you feel like, hey, I don't know what to do here, it's past what I'm capable of doing as just a family member or friend, it's okay to call in some authorities too to come provide that assistance and help. It doesn't always need to be that way, but follow your gut instinct, and you can know when that needs to happen.
That's perfect. Thank you, Tasha. We appreciate that. So I'm going to go to our last slide here because I know we're pushing time a little bit here. But here are some of the resources, and I know a lot of you are probably here to get these resources so that you can be able to use them to help. So I just want you to know there's one statistic: 46% of Americans who have never sought out mental health treatment said that they'd have no idea where to go to get any form of treatment, any form of help, whether it was for themselves, a friend, or a family member. So the question always comes to where to start. And so one of the things, so first of all, primary care physicians. They're a great place to start that can refer you to resources that can really help. And I'm going to call on Tasha or Paige if they have any more input on these resources, just because I really want to make sure that we get this information to you guys. But I know that primary care physicians have actually also been challenged to start asking a few questions. I don't know if all of them are doing it, but they've been challenged to ask a few mental health questions just to be able to help understand where their patients are. We can also talk to mental health professionals, and this oftentimes can work really well. This is professional help that we can get. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to get into these professionals just because they're, especially with COVID, there is a lot of people who are struggling with different mental issues. There's also curriculum that you can get, some educational resources from Mental Health First Aid. They can provide you with some more information, as well as this website that we have here. It's from the National Institute of Mental Health. They have some fact sheets on how to better handle stress, how to handle different things, just so you can be able to have tips to be able to improve different mental struggles that you might be having. Next is, this is a great website. The nationalcouncil.org/providers is a great website to be able to find mental health providers near you. And so it's a great website to be able to go and look for other mental health professionals. Now, these next two, I actually want you guys to pull out your phones and put these numbers into your phone. So go ahead and pull out your phones, okay? So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the crisis text line. All they have to do is text HOME to 741-741. Now, a lot of people prefer this text line because they don't have to talk to someone. It doesn't seem as difficult or as abrasive to text someone compared to if you have to talk. However, there is also the National Suicide Prevention Line, which is 1-800-273-8255. And I have those numbers in my phone. I think it's important that everyone has those numbers because you never know when you are going to be in need of those numbers in a potential scenario, just like Tasha was explaining with hers. And then last but oh, go ahead.
Sorry, can I say something real quick?
Paige. Go for it.
One cool thing, if you are putting these in your phone, it is okay for you to try, like you can call the National Suicide Prevention or you can text the crisis line and just tell them that you wanted to know what would happen if somebody called. And I really like that because a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to give you this number because I don't know if the police are going to show up and take you away, you know? But so if you're worried about that, or if you're curious, call these numbers, text this number and just say, hey, I'm just curious what would happen, you know, when somebody calls, or what you guys do to help somebody. I really, really think that's a really beneficial thing.
Perfect. That's awesome. I did not know that was an option. That's really cool. So That is good to know. Okay, and then last but not least, Farm Aid is a resource that is being developed / has been developed specifically for farmers. It's a mental health resource for farmers and ranchers. And I know that they were in the process of hiring people. I think they got them hired. I'm not sure. Tasha, do you know where they're at?
They should be hired for the Western United States
Okay.
by the end of this month. And above Callie's survey link, I put in a website. So this website's something that we've been working on with the entire Western region, and it's kind of like a clearinghouse. And so you can go and you can select your state. So if you have somebody in a different state looking for some resources, they can select a different state, and then you can select what issue you're having. So there's land resources, there's farm bureaus that are on there for, there's lending agencies. You can select kind of what issue you may be having. Of course, there's behavioral health and mental health issues, and it can link you to some resources that are able to help you within our state. So it's a really cool resource to just go and check it out and see what's there, and give that to anybody you feel may need some extra assistance.
Perfect. Thank you, Tasha. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. And Paige, do you have anything to say?
No,
okay.
We're good.
Josh, go ahead.
Well, we'd just like to thank the team for your presentation, and we hope that those of you that have attended have learned something. And again, I really appreciate what the team has done in taking these important slides and important information, I guess I would say, because the things they've been able to teach us in an hour are golden nuggets that would have otherwise been in almost a 2-day, 8-hour training. And so I appreciate their abilities to make this a lot more user-friendly as far as delivery. I would like to now turn the time over to Callie for just a reminder about the survey and how to make sure that you're able to access that. We'll go from there.
All right, thanks, Josh. Again, I did drop the link into the chat box that you can click directly if you're on your computer or on your phone, and it will go straight to the Qualtrics survey. There's just about 20 questions and takes less than 5 minutes. And again, your input and your evaluation on Jake and Paige, as well as the content, is only going to help us improve this program even more. So I appreciate it, and thank you again for letting us come present to you.
Thank you so much, Callie. If you all would just click on that, it should be pretty easy. You can do it on your phone or on your computer. And then I saw in here that it looks like Jay asked if we've considered recording this. This presentation tonight has been recorded. And what we will plan to do is we will take the slides and educational portion of it, and we will post that up to our website so that you can reference people to it. We hope that it's been helpful, and that maybe if you know somebody or you have some friends and family that you feel might benefit from being aware of these types of things, we'll make that available to you. Again, please go ahead and click on that link there. We're going to leave the meeting running for a little while, just so you have access to that link to click on it and take the survey. But we really appreciate everybody being with us tonight. I would like to thank the members of Box Elder County for joining us, and especially the producers that have suggested that we bring this type of training here and to the state of Utah. We found that the need is great, and again, your responses to the survey and your thoughts are going to help us to fine tune things so that we might be able to have even a better impact in helping others. And so again, thanks to the team for tonight, and thanks for everyone's efforts. We'll leave this meeting open. We'll go ahead and mute microphones and leave that chat box open so you can access that link. And again, if there's ever any questions or anything further that we can help with, please don't ever hesitate to call or send me an email or a message of whatever kind. These amazing team members of mine have a lot of resources, and we can make sure to provide you the best help and service possible when it comes to these types of subject matters. So again, thanks to everybody, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.